My name is Charity, co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb, and I was interviewed a while ago about my book, so now I'm here to interview Alex about his book. Alex, tell us who you are.
Yes, I'm a senior staff engineer at Volvo Cars currently. Prior to that, I was working at different media companies for 6.5 years. And I started my journey with computers since 1999, but I've been moving around a little bit. I've been a PM at some point. Have my own startup at some point. But the common theme is that it's programming. I come back to engineering and programming. And in the past few years, I accidentally became SRE, which is a funny story. We can talk about that also. Like, it wasn't the intentional SRE kind of career choice.
Wow, I didn't actually know that. That is fascinating. Now, I am a huge fan of diversifying your career, like pursuing sort of parallel skill sets, but I don't know that it's a rare SRE who comes to it later in life. What brought you into the SRE part of the world?
Yeah, so I was working at a company that it was a media company, and media makes money from ads, traditional media. And Google and Facebook were eating our lunch, basically, because they could do targeted advertisement. And it was a Norwegian company, Norway is rich. So McKinsey was in the house, and they convinced them to throw money at the problem. And they hired a lot of skilled people. Like, that was the most highly paid gang of people I have ever worked with. We opened the office in London. We got people from Gulp, people from Google and Facebook, and all over the place. Fast forward 2 years, obviously you cannot just kind of throw money at the problem while you keep the leadership. And the company broke in two half. The CEO took another part of the company. I was in the part of the company that got a new CEO. And then we went to cost saving, which seems to be a theme these days. But yeah, we went through this back in, 2016, I think, 2016, 17. And one of the things that they did is that they said, we don't want QA, we don't want DevOps, we don't want all these specialized rules. We just want generalist software developers. So anyone who doesn't want to be a generalist software developer, you're welcome to leave the company. And I didn't leave the company. I was a front-end developer at that time, and DevOps and, all this infrastructure, it looks like black magic to me. Observability, all of this is like, I didn't even know how it works. I just knew that, okay, if I write a good code in JavaScript and HTML and CSS and hand it over to those ninjas, they will run the code. And if incidents happen, it's their problem. They fix that. Overnight, I was given admin access on the companies, of the face of the company. I could go and deface it. And you know how sensitive media companies are to their public face. And that level of trust, we made some stupid mistakes, and we also went to some courses. And overall, we kind of grew into what Google, the person who coined the term site reliability engineering, says that the people from two different backgrounds come into this. Roughly half of them come from like Linux and admin, and that's like that kind of background. And the other half is the software engineers. And looking back, that's not what we called them. But one interesting dynamic that actually in my book, I touch on that. If you find a way to make quality and reliability a software engineer's problem, they're going to fix that. And that's exactly what happened.
Little did they know that they were actually way ahead of the curve, because increasingly, like, there is no more dev over here. Like, we're at the end of the road for DevOps, right? Because which is not to say that everyone's gotten there, but like the idea that you have dev teams and op teams and they're supposed to have empathy and collaborate is no. Now we have engineers who write code and who own their code in production. Everything we know about the art and science of shipping good software says it's about connecting the feedback loops and making them short. And when you tear that up into two different sets of heads, that's not a feedback loop. It's not good.
And incidents, they love these cracks. Whenever there is a handover, the incidents love to fall in, because that's where you see like, if you look inside what a team is providing, they test it and they ensure that quality is good. That's not usually where the incidents happen. Usually it's the point of handover where the ownership is ambiguous.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So you started off as a front-end engineer. You did a bunch of different things. You got into SRE, sounds like about 10 years ago. When did you start writing the book?
Yeah, the book actually, So this is also another interesting similar story. So my current company, it's a car company, and cars these days are what is funnily referred to as cow, computer on wheels. So they become a smartphone on wheels basically. The main distinguishing factor for cars is actually how well integrated the software ecosystem is to, for example, Google ecosystem, or they can run apps. And so my company invested heavily in software. The headquarters of Volvo, I don't know if you have been to Sweden, there's the two big cities. There's Stockholm and Gothenburg, and one is on the east side, another one in the west. So kind of like the US, but much, much smaller. We still use the same terms. We say the East Coast and West Coast. So the west coast of Sweden, it's a lot of manufacturing. And on the East Coast, we have many software companies. So Spotify, Skype, Minecraft, Battlefield, and King, Candy Crush. There's a lot of software companies on the East Coast. And Volvo made a strategic decision to actually open an software office in Stockholm. And that's where I come in. And initially, when I started there, I thought, well, usually when you're new to a company, I have a framework called TPOP. Tech, people, operation, product. Usually you know one of these. You know the tech, but you don't know how the company operates and what's the product, or you know the people, but you don't know the tech. So you usually know one of these and you want to self-onboard. For me, that was SRE. So I was like, okay, I've been doing SRE for a couple of years now. Maybe I can find where is the SRE team of Volvo, and then kind of self-onboard, kind of crawl my way into the organization from there. And I got lucky, and one of the senior directors there, he gave me a task of implementing SLI and SLO. First it was Dora metrics, but then it was the SLI and SLO across the organization. And at the time I had 110 teams, which is kind of big, but now since January, I'm doing that across 1,000 teams. And one of the aspects of this scale is that you can, like when in my previous company, I had just 4 teams. I knew everyone by name. I could do like workshops face to face and find the SLI and SLO. But in the new one, I had to find a way to scale that. There is no way I can go and talk to every person and kind of tell them what is SLI, SLO, build a language. So that's where the book comes in, to kind of solve that problem. How do I scale the basic language of SLI, SLO, and SLA across the company?
So how do you think, like in the intro, we were talking about, the Google SRE books. Google famously coined the term SRE and kind of pioneered the idea of generalist software engineers, doing this sort of work. But I think, and I think you think, there's a pretty significant delta between what Google thinks of as SRE and what the rest of the world thinks of as SRE. Like how does that factor into your work?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing you said, Charity, because I often use this metaphor that Google in their fantastic books, I love those books, by the way, so don't get me wrong, like I wrote a book, but there is a reason for this. I often say that in their books, it's like a fantastic chef kind of recipe for like Michelin kind of restaurants. And the most companies have started to cargo cult Google and kind of mimic what Google does, hoping to get same
but
results.
They don't have Google's business model. They don't have Google's resources. They don't have Google's stack. Yeah.
Exactly. So they started looking at their kitchen and they say, well, why I don't even have a fridge. And then there's 3 fires burning and you call them a stove. So what happens is that many companies started building a kitchen, AKA the platform engineering, rise of platform engineering. So SRE, I think it will come back once the majority of the industry will reach a point where we can actually do proper SRE. But before that, we have to first build the platform and tooling and automation, all that, those stuff. So the reason that I wrote this book is that delta actually. Yeah. So there's a gap between where Google lives and where most of the companies are.
Yeah. Honestly, I kind of wish that many of the books that were written as like almost advice, I kind of wish they were written as memoirs. Like here's what I did, here's what happened, instead of here's what you should do. Let me learn my own lessons about what I should do based on my context. Give me way more information about the context in which you were operating and which these decisions made sense. Because I think without that context and without that framing, it's not clear what lessons you should actually learn from, even though it's very, very, they're important lessons. They were hard to learn. I'm glad they shared them. But the amount to which it's applicable to the rest of the world is debatable.
Yeah, and to your point, there is a term best practice. You have heard that probably. I've used
Yeah.
it.
I know.
I'm guilty of using
I automatically roll my eyes now when I hear this. It's just kind of like, yeah,
yeah,
best
because
practice. Yeah.
I'm more fond of using fit practice, because best practice has this idea of absolutism in it. Like, this is best, objectively, this is the best. Whereas in reality, we need to find what works for a particular company based on the tech landscape, based on the budgeting, headcount, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Fit practice instead of best practice.
Yeah.
So for SRE and SLI, SLO, Dorometrics, and there is new versions of that. I don't believe in one recipe that works for everything. The more flexible it is, the more nuanced it is, and the more they are open about, like, let's look into what problem you have. The more it's like that, the more I respect it. And the more they're like, but this is the coolest thing, you have to do it. Like, nah, I don't buy that. That's the main reason I wrote this book. Otherwise, there was no reason for me to write a book when Google has published such excellent books as part of the marketing strategy for, selling cloud, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned SLIs, SLOs. A lot of your book is devoted to a lot of the nuances around this. Do you want to share for the audience how you would position? So Alex Hidalgo also wrote a book on SLOs. And I feel like the content that you've written is slightly different. In fact, you quote Alex's book quite a bit. How have you tried to add to the conversation versus what Alex put in his material?
I think for SLI and SLO, the majority of the companies that I have seen, I'm also like, people book me. I have a newsletter also, so sometimes people book me to go and talk to at their companies. The majority of the companies, from where I stand, they are not even at the level where they can talk SLI and SLO. To them, it's just, Google jargon. I don't even understand. So one of the most common SLI pitfalls is not to measure it at all. I believe that these are very powerful tools because they normalize failure. Yes. You're talking about a percentage, about the error budget, about all that stuff. And companies don't do that because they think, this is Google language. This is how Google and Borg and Kubernetes, all that stuff.
Honestly, I
so
really
that's
think
number one.
The SLI, SLO is Google's number one contribution to the field of reliability engineering. Like, they did it so well. It's the one thing that I think everyone should adopt some version of these. There are almost no exceptions.
Yes. And then when you start actually implementing, here's the second most common pitfall, is to measure the wrong thing. So there is 4 golden signals. There is error rate, latency, availability, throughput. And most companies go and measure one of these, which is kind of easy because, it's in the book. But I've written an open source product that helps the companies to find the right angle to think about it. So it's actually very visual. Back to the theme of my newsletter, which is very visual. So it's using SVG and front end. So I'm kind of piggybacking on my front end background and created a tool that creates a graph between your service provider and service consumers. And at the point of dependencies, that's where the failures can happen. So you list your failures and then sort them based on business impact and then tie the SLIs to them. I have done this more than 70 times in my current company. So this process wasn't like this in the beginning when we started. And now I can confidently say that this is kind of a foolproof way to find SLIs that are meaningful. It's only for SLI. It doesn't tell anything about SLO.
Yeah. No, I love that. I sometimes joke that Honeycomb is a sticker company where we sometimes build developer tools on the side. One of the stickers that I have says that SLOs are the APIs for your engineering teams. Because one of the things that you talk about in one of your chapters is how, talking about a lot of stuff here, but it is about how it drives the right kind of change when it comes to the relationship between the management chain and the engineers. Because there's this tendency to micromanage each other's roadmaps, each other's time. And SLOs, I think, are your most powerful tool for pushing back on that and being like, no, you don't need to understand. You don't need to have an opinion on what my team is doing with their time. As long as they're hitting these numbers that we have agreed upon, And if we're not hitting those numbers, then I'm sorry, we have to take cycles off this roadmap stuff and put it back because we have agreed. We made this agreement when we were sober, calm, looking at the numbers, not in the heat of the moment. And I just feel like it's this really important power tool for balancing all of these complex forces that are pushing and pulling teams all over the place.
Exactly. It goes back to the definition of service, like SLI. That S stands for service. What is a service? What problem are you? So I often, when I start a workshop with my teams, I ask them, Why is the company paying you? Why are you here? What problem are you solving? That is the service.
Question.
The service is not a microservice or database that is running.
Yeah.
The service is the problem you're solving, right? And that service has a level, whether you measure it and commit to it or not. So we start there. That's one thing you said, Charity, very rightly pointed out that's one thing, to abstract what goes inside the team, as long as it's providing a service. Yeah, and the second thing is that SLO, the reliability is not free, right? For every 9 you're adding, you're essentially shrinking the error budget by a factor of 10. So, and it has a cost. You have to refactor, you have to change vendors, you have to maybe improve your tooling, maybe you need to hire more, maybe you have to ship it slower. It has a cost. It is not free. Usually it is not free. I mean, sometimes you find a clever trick to improve reliability, but more often than not, there is a cost. And we want those conversations to be part of the negotiation. I mean, it's not like you have a platform team, and then the product teams will just go and pull the strings in the management chain, and they want to increase the number of nines. That's not how it's supposed to work.
The product strings are usually much stronger than the other strings. And to me, like, this is a sign of a junior engineering manager, usually versus a very seasoned engineering manager, is whether or not they know how to say no or push back and explain the trade-offs of what they're being asked to do, or whether they just accept all the assignments roll in, they just say yes to everything. The team kind of grinds to a halt. Everyone's stressed, working 60 hours a week, making no progress. Like, it doesn't work, right? And so like the engineering manager usually doesn't feel like they can just say, no, we won't do this. So the way you say no is you explain the costs. You push the costs into the room so you can have an informed discussion. So you can be like, okay, if you're asking me to do X, Y, Z, I need A, B, C, then, and that, I think that is I associate that, senior engineers, staff plus engineers are often responsible for this too. But for me, I feel like every new engineering leader needs to go through this because it doesn't come naturally to anyone. And I really feel like you can tell how seasoned and effective an engineering leader is, whether they're an IC or a manager, by how effectively they shift the discussion from the territory of what are we being asked to do to what does it cost? Exactly.
And also a bit of a PM hat there also helps, the power of positive no. For example, it's a book, I believe, with that title. But anyway, the idea is that if someone say they want you to spend more on improving your reliability, you ask why. Because as it happens, you can do a lot with UX and inside the front end. For example, they say that we need the UI to be faster. But with some UX tweaks, you can actually make it appear faster. But behind the scene, you're just polling, and you kind of hide that unreliability much cheaper than investing in. It's a fun story I can tell is that I was hired in another company for very poor reviews, and it's because the app was not very good reliability wise, and they decided to throw money at the problem, and that's where I come in. And as soon as we started talking to the CTO, what's the SLI and SLO you want? He said, I want 99.999 availability. It's like, what are you smoking? I want some of that. It must be really good. Like, this is a media streaming app. What you're talking about is the realm of high availability systems like hospital information or,
what they're asking for. They don't know. What they're actually saying when they say that, what they mean is we want our customers to have a good experience. Turns out you don't need 5 nines reliability for customers to have a good experience.
No, exactly. And we did the UX research, and we realized that up until 2 hours of unavailability users can put up for this particular product before changing vendors. And that's 99.7, if I remember correctly. That's workable because there were just 1,000 people. It's like we were not Google.
Yeah.
And we're building on top of something else. We don't own our own platform. So we cannot be more reliable than that cloud provider, for example.
It's turtles all the way down. My favorite quote from this section was, you said, I'm fully aware of the risk of service levels being weaponized by management. However, I'd like to honestly invite my engineering peers to look at it as a way to use hard data to put an end to emotional discussions. I love that.
Yeah, it actually comes from one of the companies in, I don't know if it is big in the US, Klarna. I used to work at that company. One of the things that they did is that they use a blanket SLI for all services. Like, we just measure availability regardless of what you're building, which is one of the pitfalls, one of the less common pitfalls, that you just measure everything the same. It has to be fit to the product. So they have defined several classes of reliability. Like it depends on where your system sits in the critical user path, where how the business is making money. Then you had different number of nines. But again, it was very cookie cutter. It wasn't so much about like, okay, so maybe we can get away with 99 because that will dramatically reduce the cost of building such a system. You can make it much more hand-wavy, for lack of a better word. Not every system deserves to be as reliable. There are certainly some systems that really deserve the cost, but most systems, no.
Oh no, it's delayed by 30 seconds. Come on. One other thing I feel obligated morally to throw in here that is something that I think most people in the world don't have yet, but I have come to think of as absolutely necessary for good SLOs is calculating your SLOs from the same data that you're using to investigate. Like the way Honeycomb does it is you define your SLIs, your SLOs, they're computed from the events that you're shipping into the system. So if there are events that are violating the SLI, you can just click on them and see exactly which requests are, you can run bubble up, which is a Honeycomb thing. It's just like you any heat map or thing, you draw a little bubble around the thing. You're like, oh, what is this? And it diffs what's inside the bubble versus the baseline. So it's like, oh, this is the thing you care about. Oh, all of the errors in this time range are from Android devices, from this region, for hitting this cache server or whatever combination of things it is. Because I feel like when you have to jump between tools or sources of truth, you often you can spend more time trying to figure out the differences between those data sources instead of if they don't agree on what the problem is. And I think being able to like just switch fluidly back and forth between, oh, here are my SLIs, here are my SLOs, and here's the data that is flowing into them. It's such a power tool.
Yeah, I haven't worked with Honeycomb, unfortunately. Most of my experience comes from Observability 1, as you would call it, like traditional observability providers. Yeah. One of the things that I've heard so many good things about Honeycomb. I wanted to get a demo before I get to talk to you, but unfortunately that we couldn't sort that out. But one of the things that I got really, really excited when I learned about it is that SLO is a first-class citizen in Honeycomb. And that's how it should be. It shouldn't be some, checking a box or something, and then you only enable it in some enterprise tier or something. No, this is such a core topic.
You shouldn't have static dashboards that are your entry point into your systems. It should be the most business critical information. Like that should be what you look at and use as your jumping off point into exploration and
And the other thing that you said, like it should be the same data I saw. I haven't seen this in the wild, unfortunately, but that's like a dream come true. If there is a company who does it like that, that's how it should be done.
I don't know of anyone but Honeycomb, but I believe, honestly, between you, me, and our podcast listeners, these changes are being driven by soaring complexity. And I really do think that the Observability 1.0 model of storing, we've never been able in this industry to treat observability like a data problem. Why? Because we're putting every signal to its own storage location. You can't query over a combination of metrics and exceptions and traces. You can't query it. You can't run an ETL process. You can't derive summary to statistics, And every single observability company has been founded since 2019 has followed the 2.0 model of having single source of truth backed by column. Anyway, this is not about that, but I think, I think the next generation of tools will absolutely have SLOs as a first-class citizen because it's such a game changer. By the way, I think my other favorite chapter of yours was the organization architecture. I don't know if we have enough time to talk about it, but I really encourage everyone to look it up. It's got so many cool little diagrams. I love the one with the little smiley faces and the secret gay crutch supports the same football team. O's favorite, just like, yes, this is what the real engineer organization looks like. And it's so good. I can't go to it, but I think we have like 1 or 2 minutes left. What's the best book you've read in the last year? The best one I read, it was called Fluke, Chance, Chaos, and Why Everything We Do Matters. And I love this because I grew up religious. I'm not religious anymore, but I feel like there are kind of two sort of competing extremes, right? There are people who are like, nothing we do really matters. Like someone was going to invent the light bulb. Does it really matter if it was Edison or one of 200 other people, versus people who are like, no, everything we do really matters. We have agency. We can make an impact. And in reality, he talks about how there's truth to both of these, but actually there's a lot of contingency in history. There's a lot of World War II, World War II wouldn't have happened without World War I. And World War I happened through a series of wildly improbable events, like the emperor slips on a banana peel type of, things. And so Like, his takeaway was not everything you do ends up changing the world, obviously, but some of the things you do end up changing the world. And you have no way of predicting which things, right? A stray comment you make to someone maybe, compounds and results in them starting a company years later, which results in them, changing the world, the butterfly effect. And I just found this so, as an atheist, just deep. There is meaning to our existence, right? And there are reasons to be mindful of the impact that we have in the world, even if most of what we do will get drowned out in the noise of history. So yeah, Fluke, loved it.
Yes. Speaking of books, I think the one other book that really changed me was The Elephant in the Brain. So that one talks about that a lot of what is happening that we think we have done this is actually, the decision is made in the subconscious of the brain, and we just observe it and justify that it was me who did that. Tell that to anyone who was handling an incident.
Love it. All right, I have 2 great new books for my reading stack. Alex, this has been so much fun. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Thank you, Charity. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise.
Subscribe to the GOTO YouTube channel now and join the experts in person or online at any upcoming GOTO conference using the promo code Book Club. Visit gotopia.tech to learn more.